In the summer of 1975, Freddie Mercury played a recording to the head of Elektra Records in America and waited for a response. The recording was Bohemian Rhapsody. The response was, "This cannot be released as a single. It is 6 minutes long. Radio stations do not play records that are 6 minutes long. It will not get airplay. It will not chart. It is an interesting experiment, but it is not a commercial release." Freddie Mercury listened to this assessment. He did not argue with it. He waited. And then he did something that his record label executives had not anticipated, and that changed the entire trajectory of the conversation. He played them something else, not a different song, not a revised edit, not a shorter version. Something else entirely, and the assessment changed. The record was released, it went to #1 and stayed there for 9 weeks. It has since accumulated over 2 billion streams and over 1.8 billion YouTube views, and is regularly cited as one of the greatest songs ever recorded. The person who said it could not be released was wrong. Freddie Mercury knew they were wrong before they knew it themselves, and the specific thing he did to demonstrate this is one of the least told stories in the history of the song. Bohemian Rhapsody was recorded across 3 weeks in August 1975 at Rockfield Studio in Wales, the same residential studio where, a year later, Somebody to Love would be made. The sessions were produced by Roy Thomas Baker, who had been working with Queen since their first album and who understood the specific quality of Freddie Mercury's ambitions for this song. The song had been written by Freddie Mercury over a period of years. The specific genesis is not precisely documented, but the structure was essentially complete in Freddie Mercury's head before the formal recording began. He had the operatic midsection, he had the hard rock ending, he had the ballad opening, he had the choir of layered vocals that would require, across the 3 weeks of recording, approximately 180 separate vocal overdubs. The recording was an act of sustained ambition on a scale that the professional recording studio world of 1975 had not previously encountered in quite this form. At the end of the 3 weeks, what existed on tape was a recording that the people who made it knew was unlike anything that had been previously released. The specific problem that the record label executives identified when they heard Bohemian Rhapsody was not a problem with the song itself. Nobody who heard the song described it as bad or poorly made. The problem was structural. The song was 5 minutes and 55 seconds long in its album version, and the radio infrastructure of 1975 was built around the 3-minute single. Radio stations had been trained, across decades of commercial radio practice, to program music in units of approximately 3 minutes, long enough to be substantial, short enough to allow advertising breaks and presenter chat and the specific rhythm of commercial radio. A 6-minute record disrupted this infrastructure. Programmers and promoters in 1975 genuinely believed that a 6-minute record could not receive sufficient airplay to generate chart momentum. The record label executives who expressed this concern were not wrong about the structural reality. They were wrong about one thing, that the structural reality was more powerful than what was inside the recording. The rule was real. 3 minutes. That was what radio played. That was what charted. That was what the infrastructure was built for. And Freddie Mercury had made a 6-minute record. And the people whose job it was to assess commercial viability said, "This cannot be a single." And Freddie Mercury did not argue with the rule. He demonstrated that the rule did not apply. The way he demonstrated it is the part of the story that nobody fully tells. The specific thing that Freddie Mercury did to demonstrate that Bohemian Rhapsody could be released as a single involved Kenny Everett, a British radio DJ who was, in 1975, one of the most popular and influential broadcasters in the United Kingdom. Kenny Everett was given a copy of Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen's management, either directly or through a connection at the label, with the informal understanding that it was for private listening rather than broadcast. Kenny Everett took it home. He played it. He played it again. He played it several more times. And then, according to multiple accounts, he played it on his radio show without having been given clearance to do so. He played it because he thought it was extraordinary, and because the listener response was extraordinary, and because the specific quality of the record demanded to be heard rather than to be assessed. The listeners called in. They called in to ask what the song was and when it would be available and where they could buy it. They called in before the record was officially released. The record label heard this, and the assessment began to change. The specific quality of Freddie Mercury's position during the Bohemian Rhapsody debate is the quality of someone who knew something that the people around him did not yet know, but would eventually have to acknowledge. He was not arguing from commercial logic. He did not make the case for the record on the terms the record label was using. He made the case on a single term: trust me. Just trust me. This is the phrase that multiple accounts of the Bohemian Rhapsody release story attribute to Freddie Mercury when the label expressed their concerns. Just trust me. Not here is the marketing strategy. Not here is why the 3-minute rule does not apply in this case. Just trust me. The confidence was not arrogance. It was the specific certainty of a person who had listened to the record they had made and understood what was inside it in a way that a record label executive who was assessing it against a commercial framework could not yet fully understand. Freddie Mercury had lived inside the record for 3 weeks. He knew what it was. He knew that what it was exceeded the framework being used to assess it. The record label's proposed solution to the length problem was an edited version, a shorter cut of Bohemian Rhapsody that would fit the 3-minute format. This solution is the standard industry response to a long record with commercial potential. Cut it down, sacrifice some of the middle section, get it to 3 minutes, and it can be a single. Freddie Mercury refused. He has been quoted as saying, in various forms across multiple accounts, that the song could not be edited, that the structure of Bohemian Rhapsody was not a structure that could be shortened without destroying what made it what it was. The operatic midsection, the hard rock ending, the specific arc from the ballad opening to the full conclusion, these were not separable elements that could be trimmed to accommodate a radio format. They were the song. The song was 6 minutes. It was not shorter. It would not be made shorter. This was not a negotiating position. It was a description of the specific artistic reality that Freddie Mercury understood and that the record label would have to accept or reject without modification. They asked for a shorter version. He said no. The song is what the song is. 6 minutes. It will not be made shorter. And the record label had to decide whether to release the full 6-minute version or not release it at all. And Kenny Everett's listeners, thousands of them, calling in, asking where they could buy the record that had just played on the radio, were the specific evidence that the assessment of commercial viability had been wrong. The rule was real. The record exceeded the rule. Both things were true, and the record was released. Bohemian Rhapsody was released as a single on the 31st of October, 1975 in the United Kingdom. It entered the UK singles chart at number 47 and reached number 1 within 2 weeks, where it remained for 9 consecutive weeks, a run of commercial success that had not been achieved by a British rock band in years, and that comprehensively demonstrated the incorrectness of the initial assessment. The 6-minute record that could not receive sufficient airplay to chart had received sufficient airplay and had charted. The radio stations that were built around the 3-minute format had played a 6-minute record because their listeners demanded it and because the specific quality of the record produced a response that the programmers could not manage away. The rule had been real. The record had exceeded it, and the record executive who had said no had been wrong. And Freddie Mercury had known they were wrong before the chart positions confirmed it. And the confirmation was not surprise to him. It was simply the arrival of evidence for something he had already known. The promotion of Bohemian Rhapsody was accompanied by one of the first uses of what would later be called a music video for a rock song, a promotional film directed by Bruce Gowers, filmed in a single day and broadcast on Top of the Pops in November 1975, when Queen were unable to appear in person. The specific quality of the Bohemian Rhapsody promotional film, the silhouettes, the operatic visual imagery, was as innovative visually as the record was sonically. It was made to extend the record into a visual dimension that a radio context could not provide. The Top of the Pops broadcast accelerated the chart momentum already building. The promotional film, made in a single day, is now considered one of the founding documents of the music video form. The initial rejection of Bohemian Rhapsody as a single by the record label is not, in retrospect, evidence of stupidity or aesthetic blindness on the part of the executives who made it. It is evidence of the specific limitations of professional commercial assessment, the specific way in which the frameworks used to evaluate commercial viability are constructed from the evidence of what has worked before, and therefore cannot, by definition, fully account for the thing that has never been done before. Bohemian Rhapsody had never been done before. There was no framework for assessing it because nothing like it existed in the commercial record. The record label executives applied the frameworks. They had the 3-minute rule, the radio airplay requirement, the specific commercial logic of the mid-1970s pop market, and the framework said this cannot be a single. The frameworks were not wrong. They were insufficient. They could not account for what was inside the record because what was inside the record did not fit into any existing category of commercial assessment. Freddie Mercury understood this. He had made the thing that the frameworks could not assess. He knew the frameworks were insufficient. He said, "Just trust me." The frameworks said no. The record exceeded the frameworks. Both of these things were true simultaneously. The professionals who said no were doing their jobs correctly using the tools available to them. The tools were not adequate to the specific thing that had been made. Freddie Mercury knew the tools were inadequate before the chart positions proved it. He had lived inside the record for 3 weeks. He knew what was inside it. He said, "Just trust me." And the 9 weeks at #1 was the trust, retrospectively vindicated. The commercial success of Bohemian Rhapsody as a single changed what a single could be, not immediately, but gradually and permanently, in the way that a large enough success rewrites the rules that predicted it would fail. The 3-minute rule did not disappear, but it became less absolute. The evidence that a 6-minute record could go to #1 for 9 weeks was evidence that could not be argued away. The rule was weakened. The framework expanded. And the expansion of the framework was Freddie Mercury's contribution to the commercial infrastructure of rock music. Not only the song, but what the song proved, that the right thing, made completely enough, exceeds the frameworks used to assess it. Bohemian Rhapsody went to #1 in the United Kingdom a second time in November 1991, following Freddie Mercury's death on the 24th of November of that year. The second chart run in which the record reached #1 again and remained there for 5 weeks was a specific form of collective grief that the British public expressed through purchasing a record. The specific choice of Bohemian Rhapsody as the vehicle for that expression, rather than any of Queen's other records, rather than any other recording associated with Freddie Mercury, is the acknowledgement of what had already been understood for 16 years, that Bohemian Rhapsody was the most complete expression of what Freddie Mercury was, and that the loss of Freddie Mercury was most completely expressed by the record that most completely expressed him. The record that could not be released went to #1 twice. The first time proved the rule wrong. The second time was something else. The world saying goodbye to the person who had made it. #1 in 1975, 9 weeks. #1 in 1991, 5 weeks. The record that could not be released. The record that could not be a single. The 6-minute record that radio could not play. It went to #1 in 1975 because Freddie Mercury was right about what he had made. It went to #1 in 1991 because the world needed a way to say goodbye to the person who made it, and the specific record it chose was the one that had been told it could not be released. That is the whole story, from the refusal to the goodbye. In the summer of 1975, the head of Elektra Records in America listened to Bohemian Rhapsody and said it could not be released as a single. And Freddie Mercury said, "Just trust me." And Kenny Everett played it on his radio show, and the listeners called in, and the record was released, and it went to #1 for 9 weeks, and it went to #1 again 16 years later when Freddie Mercury was gone, and it has been streamed over 2 billion times, and it has been watched over 1.8 billion times on YouTube, and it is described by critics and listeners and musicians as one of the greatest recordings ever made. The person who said no was wrong. Freddie Mercury was right. Both of these things were true from the moment the recording was finished, in August 1975, in a studio in Wales. The chart positions did not make him right. He was already right. He had listened to the record. He knew what was inside it. He said, "Just trust me." And he waited for the world to catch up.